Hello students. So far we have discussed about what is force and what are its different types. So we have also discussed about when the force is acting on your body, when we can call it as a balanced force or unbalanced force. Now today we'll discuss about Newton's laws of motion. Okay. So Newton actually formulated three laws on motion, which is called as Newton's laws of motion. One is called as Newton's first law of motion. Second one is Newton's second law of motion, and third one is called as Newton's third law of motion. Now we will discuss about Newton's first law of motion and how he formulated this law. Okay, so here first we'll discuss about Newton's first law of motion. That is what we are going to discuss in this video. Okay, actually if we'll go for that, how the motion and force are related with each other. So in that case, before Galileo, Aristotle, he suggested that to start a motion, a force is needed. Yes, that is your observation. You might have noticed that. Let's suppose a football is there on the ground. So this is a football which is just resting on the ground. Unless you kick it, it's not going to roll over the ground. So that means if you give a kick here, so that means you are applying the force to it, then only it will start rolling on the ground. Okay, so that means here what I said here, to start the motion, a force is needed. This is one example. Another example, let's suppose you are riding a bicycle. Without paddling a bicycle, can it start its motion? No, you cannot start the motion. So that means you have to apply you have to do the paddling, then only what? The bicycle will run on the road. So that means you can say paddling means what? Actually you are applying the force. So that means unless you are applying the force, a motion cannot be started. So this is one thing which is given by a suggestion which was given by Aristotle. It was correct, right? But he also suggested that to keep a body in motion, a force is also required. So what was the suggestion by Aristotle? So according to Aristotle, Aristotle's theory, if you look at, okay, to start motion, force is required. So this is one theory what was suggested by him. Second thing is to keep a body in motion, force is also required. Now why he said that? If you look at anything in your neighborhood, you can find this to be correct. You can feel it to be correct. But whether it is correct or not, we'll say it later on. So see here what he said, to keep a body in motion, force is required. Just an example of riding a bicycle. So suppose you are riding a bicycle and stop pedaling. Will the bicycle move for a longer distance? You will notice that if you stop pedaling, after covering some distance, it will come to stop. So that means what was the suggestion or what was the observation given by Aristotle, that to keep a body in motion, force is required? I feel that is right here. So that means if I am stopping pedaling, so in that case the motion is also getting stopped. So that means if I want that the cycle should continue its motion, then I need to continuously apply paddling here. So that means if I do paddling continuously, then in that case I am applying the force continuously to keep the bicycle in motion. So that means what was the suggestion given by Aristotle? It is right. According to Aristotle, it was right. But the second, that suggestion what was given by Aristotle, it was proved to be wrong. By whom? It is proved to be wrong by Galileo. So another scientist, Galileo, so he said that the first observation, first suggestion what was given by Aristotle, it is right. So according to him, yes, to set the body into motion, a force is needed. It is correct. But to keep a body in motion, a force is required. That is wrong statement. Why he said like that? What was the observation? So according to him, if a body is at rest, it will remain at rest. If a body is in uniform motion, in that case the body will continue to be in the uniform motion. Okay, you don't require to apply any force to keep it in that uniform motion. So according to him, why he suggested like this? So suppose this is a ground, okay, and this is a frictionless ground. This is frictionless ground. Frictionless. What do you mean by friction? Friction, I said you, when two bodies are in contact, always an opposing force act against the motion of a body. And this opposing force is called as force of friction. What is the work of this force of friction? Always it opposes the motion. So that's what happens. A body in motion, after some time it will come to rest, or it will come to stop. So that is what the friction is. But if the ground will be such that it will be completely frictionless, there will be no friction, then the body which is rolling, now it will keep on rolling, because friction will not be there. If it is a frictionless ground, there will be no friction. If there will be no friction, then nothing is acting against its motion. Then in that body, if a body is in motion, it will continue to be in motion. And to keep the body in motion, we don't require any force. Like just an example, what was the statement here? Second case I said, suppose a football is rolling on the ground. Though you have not applied any force, you will see that after some time, the football come to rest. Okay, so this is a common experience, observation also, we have seen it. So why the football come to rest? Why it is coming to rest? Why? Because there is a friction which is continuously acting with the ground. And due to this friction, that friction may be with the ground, that friction will be that with the air. So that means some kind of friction is acting over here. And this friction only, what it is, stopping the motion of that body. And that due to that only, after some time, the football coming to stop. But if suppose that frictional force is not there, then in that case, the football which is rolling, so it will be continuously rolling with the same, or you can say the constant speed, or you can say the uniform speed. And to keep this body in motion, we will not require any force. So that means once it will be set into motion, then it will keep on moving with the same speed in the same direction. And we don't require any force to do that. So that means here, the second statement what was given by Aristotle, that to keep a body in motion, a force is required, that is actually wrong. Okay, Galileo, actually what is the statement given by Galileo here? So Galileo's, what is that observation? It is put in a law which is called as Galileo's law of inertia. According to this law of inertia, if a body is at rest, it will continue to be in rest. This is the first part of this law. And second part is, if a body is in uniform motion, then it will continue to be in the same uniform motion along the same direction. So this was the statement which was given by Galileo, which is called as Galileo law of inertia. According to him, what he said, if a body is at rest, then it will remain at rest, or it will continue to be in rest. And if a body is in uniform motion, then it will continue to be in the same uniform motion in a straight line. Okay, so unless that force is applied. If you are not applying any force, it will continue to be in the same uniform motion. So that was what the statement of law, Galileo's law of inertia, and this two statement, they combined by Newton to put forth his first law of motion. Now what is the statement of this Newton's first law of motion? According to this, if a body is in rest, it will continue to be in rest, and if it is in uniform motion, then it will continue to be in uniform motion along a straight line until and unless an external unbalanced force acts. Okay, so this is a statement given by Newton's first law of motion. Okay, so what is the statement? You can see, if a body is in rest, it will continue to be in the rest. And if a body is in uniform motion, then it will continue to be in the same uniform motion along a straight line until and unless an external unbalanced force acts. So previous video we had discussed about what is unbalanced force and what is balanced force. I said you balanced force in the sense what the net force acting is 0. So in that case the body will not have any acceleration, because there is net force is acting 0. But when there is an unbalanced force is acting, then in that case the body may accelerate. Okay, so that is what. So in this case, that means what is the statement? If you look at Newton's first law of motion, it talks about 3 things. What is that? So if you look, or the observation from this Newton's first law of motion, if you see, it is telling you about 3 things. First thing is, if a body is in rest, it will be in rest if no unbalanced force act. This is the first part. If a body is in rest, it will continue to be in the same rest condition if there will be no unbalanced force acts. If we take any example over here, let's suppose there is a table, and on this, let's suppose a book is lying here. This is a book lying on the surface of this table. If no force is applied from external side, that means nobody will apply the force to this book, then the position of the book is not going to change, or you can say the state of the book is not going to change. It will remain stationary at the same place on the table. So that this is the statement which is given by Newton. So here, as I said, if a body is at rest, it will continue to be at the same rest condition unless an external unbalanced force acts. So that means this is the first part of the Newton's first law of motion. Okay, Newton tries to say about the first thing is this. That means everybody in this universe continues to be in the same state of rest unless any external unbalanced force is acting. Now go for the second observation from this Newton's first law. Now the second thing what Newton tries to say in his first law of motion is what? If a body is in uniform motion. Okay, what is that? If a body is in uniform motion, then it will continue to move with the same speed unless an external unbalanced force act. Okay, so that means if a body is in uniform motion, if you remember what is uniform motion? Uniform motion means what? The body is moving with a constant speed. That is called as uniform motion. Okay, so that means here, if the body is moving with a constant speed, that means a particular speed if it is maintaining, then in that case, then you can say the body will continue to move with the same speed unless an external force acts. Now let's suppose a body is moving with the speed, suppose this is a body which is moving with the speed of suppose 20 km/h. So unless any external force acts, this magnitude of the speed is not going to change. It will remain the same 20 km per hour unless you are applying any external unbalanced force. That is the outcome of the what? This is the second outcome of the Newton's first law of motion. Then Newton's third outcome from this Newton's first law of motion is what? If a body is moving in a straight line, it cannot change its direction until and unless an external unbalanced force acts. Okay, so what I said here, if a body is moving in a straight line, so here also if a body is moving in a particular speed, it's moving with a particular speed in a particular direction, then it cannot change its direction of its own unless what? An external force is applied on it. So here you take an example, suppose you are going through your bicycle in a straight road, okay, then suddenly a turn comes, you have to take a turn. So if you continue to move in the same direction, it will be difficult for you to take a turn. So you might have noticed that, so when you have to take a turn, you are actually what? Turning your handle of the bicycle. So when you are turning, then in that case you are what? Going through the turn easily. So that means while you are turning, actually what you are doing? You are applying an external force on your what? Handle. If you will not do, then in that case you won't be able to take the turn. So that means here the same thing what I said, if a body is moving in a straight line, then it will continue to what? Move in the same straight line, or you can say it cannot change its direction until and unless what? An external unbalanced force is acting. So these three things what we have discussed. One is what? If a body is at rest, it will continue to be in the same rest condition unless an external force acts. Second outcome is what? If a body is in uniform motion, that means if it is moving at a constant speed, it will be keep on moving with the same constant speed unless an external force is acting. And third outcome is what? A body moving in a particular line, or you can say straight line, it is unable to change its direction, or it will continue to move in the same straight line until and unless an external force acts to what? Change its direction. So these are the three outcomes of the what? Newton's first law of motion. Okay, so this Newton's first law of motion again defines two things here. Now if you see that, we have again seen that this Newton's first law of motion helping us to define two different things here. One is what? It helps us to define, or it gives the definition of inertia. Okay, and second thing is what? It is also helping us to define what is force. So this is definition of force. So that means this Newton's first law is helping us to find the two definitions here. One is what? The definition of inertia, and the second one is what? The definition of force. Now if you look at its first part, it's helping us to actually find the definition of inertia. Now what is definition of inertia? So as if you see the statement of the Newton's first law of motion, what is the statement? If a body is in state of rest, or if it is in the state of uniform motion, it will continue to be in the same state unless what? An external force acts. So that means this is the first part, which is actually define what is inertia. So if you look at what is inertia, now inertia is actually what? It is the inability of a body. It is the inability of a body to change its state of its own. Look at this, is very important. What is inertia? What I said, what is inertia? It is the inability of a body to change its state of its own. So that means all the bodies in this universe, they cannot change their state of rest or state of motion, okay, state of uniform motion, of their own. That means to do so, they require an external unbalanced force to act on that body. So that is what the inertia is. Like just an example, let's suppose there is a table lying on the floor of its own, it cannot change its position. Okay, so similarly, if a body is in uniform motion, it cannot change its uniform motion to rest. It cannot come to rest of its own. That same discussion what you're doing, a football rolling on the ground with uniform motion, after some time it is coming to stop. But just now I said the statement, if a body is in uniform motion, it cannot change its state of uniform motion. It cannot come to stop of its own. Then if the football is not coming to stop with its own, then who is that helping it? That is what we have already previously discussed, that is the what? That is the force of friction. So as that statement I said, what? A body of its own cannot change its state of motion, state of uniform motion. What is required here? A force must be required. So that inability of a body is also called as what? Inertia. Similarly, a body of its own cannot change its direction also. Okay, suppose you are going through, like suppose a car, you are sitting in a car and you are just moving. You have to take a turn without steering. Without using the steering to turn the car, that we cannot do it. We cannot change the direction. So that means to change the direction also we require a force. So that is what, so this is the inability of the body, that they cannot change their direction of its own. So this inability, due to which a body cannot change its state of rest or state of uniform motion or its direction, that inability is actually called as, that is inertia. And that is what the definition of inertia we are getting in the first part of what? That Newton's first law of motion. So that's why Newton's first law of motion is also called as what? This is called as law of inertia. Newton's first law of motion is also called as what? Law of inertia. Okay, so you understood why this Newton's first law of motion is called as law of inertia. Now we see that how the same Newton's laws of motion, Newton's first law of motion is helped to get the definition of force. So if we look at here what I said, a body continues to be in the same state unless force is applied, unless an unbalanced force is applied. Okay, so that means what is force? You can say force is a physical cause in the form of a push or a pull, due to which a body can change its state of rest or of uniform motion or a direction. Okay, that was the definition of force. What was the definition of force? Force is what? Force is a physical cause which is in the form of either push or pull, due to which what happens? If a body is at rest, it can change to motion. That means the state of the body can change. Okay, similarly, the direction of the body or direction of motion of the body can change. The speed of the motion of the body change. So that means that is actually the force. So that means definition of force, we can get it from the what? Newton's first law of motion. You understood what I said here? Why the definition of force? Because as per Newton's first law of motion, what was suggested here? That means if a body is at rest, it will continue to be rest. Till what? Till the force is not applied. That means force is what? Force is the cause due to which the body's state of rest is changing. Similarly, if a body is in uniform motion, it will continue to be in uniform motion until and unless what? An external force acts. So that means here also if you look at what is force, force is that external cause due to which what? A body's state of motion is getting changed. So that means the definition what we have already discussed, what is force? So that definition we are also deriving from the what? That Newton's first law of motion. Okay, so that is how the Newton's first law of motion, it defines inertia as well as also it defines what? That is force.